I had always believed that relocating to Oakwood Estates would represent the ideal advancement in my professional life. The area was immaculate, featuring perfectly trimmed lawns, matching mailboxes, and not a single basketball hoop in sight. What I hadn't anticipated was that this level of flawlessness carried a hidden price. That price was embodied by Karen Wilkins, who served as the head of our homeowners association. From the moment I settled in, Karen made it clear that she viewed herself as the informal leader, arbiter, and enforcer of our small enclave. "Welcome to Oakwood Estates," she had announced with a strained grin on that initial day, holding a clipboard firmly. "I'm Karen Wilkins, HOA president. You'll have to go over the community rules right away. There are 137 regulations, and I personally oversee every one." She passed me a binder that felt heavier than my computer. I had no idea then that this binder would turn into the arena for our suburban conflict. The issue started off quite harmlessly. I am employed in the field of information technology, frequently working remotely, and during the previous summer, I chose to enhance my home workspace. This involved adding a compact satellite antenna for improved online access. In line with the HOA regulations, I filed the necessary forms, complete with precise sketches showing the antenna's location on my roof, hardly noticeable from the road, and colored to blend with the shingles. 3 days following the setup, there came a crisp, patterned rap at my door. I answered to see Karen, her light blonde bob utterly still in the wind, sunglasses resting atop her head like a tiara. "That satellite antenna is in breach," she proclaimed, gesturing emphatically toward my roof as though spotting a criminal. "It's unsightly and needs to be taken down within 24 hours. I kept my cool, even as my tolerance was starting to fray. "In fact, Karen, I turned in the forms last month and got the go-ahead. I have the proof right here." I grabbed the file I'd begun storing near the entrance just for such encounters. Her gaze sharpened as she grabbed the documents from me. "This approval is provisional," she stated with a casual flick. "The board has reevaluated. The antenna interferes with the visual balance of our neighborhood." I couldn't avoid observing that her own residence, just 3 houses away, featured a comparable antenna, somewhat concealed by her chimney. "The Federal Communications Commission safeguards my ability to set up this device," I clarified steadily, "and the HOA has already sanctioned it. It's remaining in place." I noticed the flush creeping up her face as I carefully reclaimed my documents and shut the door. That interaction, I would come to understand later, was simply the initial strike in Karen's targeted campaign against me. In the following weeks, I got infraction alerts for all sorts of things. My lawn was a 1/4 inch too tall. My trash bin stayed at the curb for 15 minutes post-pickup. My vehicle had stayed in the driveway for over 8 straight hours. Every alert included a possible penalty, and each bore Karen's elaborate signature along with a smiley face that oddly appeared more menacing than cheerful. I challenged each infraction using photos and time records, including the full HOA board in my replies. Before long, other board members started voicing their annoyance at these trivial issues. "We have more pressing topics to address than the placement of Mr. Mitchell's trash bins," one board member noted in an email that was inadvertently sent everyone in the community. Karen's reply was quick and biting, implying that some board members weren't fulfilling their duties with sufficient gravity. The conflict intensified when I opted to add surveillance cameras to my home. There were accounts of package thefts in adjacent areas, and since I often get costly tech gear for my job, I aimed to be vigilant. Once more, presented the required documents, added layouts of the camera placements, and obtained clearance from the HOA Architectural Review Group, a group that pointedly excluded Karen. 2 days after the setup, I came back from buying groceries to discover Karen on my lawn with a measuring tape, checking the precise spacing from my security camera to the boundary. "These cameras are monitoring communal spaces and adjacent homes," she charged as I neared with my hands loaded with bags. "That's a breach of privacy and violates HOA policies." I placed my bags on the stoop and folded my arms. "The cameras are directed solely at my own land, Karen. They don't record any shared areas or nearby properties. The architectural group approved them last week." I displayed the confirmation on my phone. Her mouth tightened into a thin line. I'm superseding their ruling. Those are violence devices must be dismantled by tomorrow morning, or you'll face a penalty of $500 each day. She pivoted sharply, almost stumbling over a sprinkler in her rush to depart my yard. That night, I examined their recordings from my freshly added cameras and spotted something unusual. At around 3:00 p.m., while I was out at the supermarket, a person had neared my satellite antenna with what looked like a paint canister. When I enlarged the image, I was stunned to recognize it was Karen in person, trying to coat my satellite antenna in black. Likely target was an unauthorized shade. Luckily, she couldn't access it without taking some steps. I forwarded this video to the HOA leadership with the courteous yet resolute message stating that I was experiencing harassment from their leader and would value their involvement. Their plea was underwhelming, but expected. They proposed that resolve it as fellow residents, and noted that we're all members of the same group. It was evident that despite their internal irritations with Karen, they weren't prepared to challenge her openly. The next weekend, you will devote the day to seeing my folks, who reside roughly 2 hours distant. When I got back home on Sunday night, an item drew my attention on the edge of my residence. A tiny dark item affixed beneath the roofline. On near examination, comprehended with astonishment that it was a camera, one I certainly hadn't set up. It was directed straight in my rear yard. My initial urge was to dismantle it right away, but my occupational habits took over. Instead, I captured images, recording the relocation, then meticulously checked the vicinity. I found 2 additional unapproved cameras. One focused on my entryway and another directed at my workspace window. These weren't protective cameras, they were monitoring tools, and I had a strong suspicion about who had placed them. Rather than facing Karen head-on, I dialed the non-urgent police number and detailed the circumstances. 2 officers showed up in under an hour, recorded the illicit cameras, and verified they were actively sending signals to an unidentified device. The officers were highly alarmed, clarifying that placing monitoring gear on another's land without permission was unlawful, possibly amounting to criminal intrusion, breach of privacy, and even potential harassment based on the purpose. Do you have any notion who could have set these up? One officer inquired, though his manner implied he already guessed the culprit. I possess some video from my own authorized cameras that could assist, I answered, welcoming them into Orsto. Watch the clips. Indeed, my cameras had recorded Karen creeping into me yard early that morning, equipment case seen tow, systematically placing her covered cameras while I was absent. The officer shook their heads while viewing. Will require a duplicate of this video, the lead officer stated, his face serious. This is a grave legal issue. While the officers were still at my residence, collecting proof, and obtaining declarant, a vehicle entered my driveway. It was Karen, clipboard ready, clearly coming to issue another infraction warning. The expression on her face upon spotting the police vehicle was one I'll always remember. A blend of astonishment, outrage, and the initial hints of real dread. One of the officers went out to stop her. Ma'am, are you Karen Wilkins? He questioned. Yes, I'm the HOA leader, she responded with that identical stern grin, though it faltered a bit at the sides. Is there an issue, officer? We're probing the illegal installation of monitoring gear on this land, he explained. Would you know anything regarding that? Her expression underwent a striking shift from assured command to frantic refusal in moments. I have no clue what you mean, she stuttered, retreating toward her vehicle. He's simply here to issue a warning about inadequate yard upkeep. Ma'am, we possess video proof of you setting up these items earlier today. The officer proceeded. I'm going to require you to remain right here as we handle this. What in Swed was at once the most awkward and gratifying hour of my community life. The officers verified the cameras were sending to a device in Karen's home workspace. They outlined to her progressively firm language the gravity of her conduct as she went through justifications. Initially, she asserted it was her privilege as HOA leader to oversee possible breaches. When that didn't work, she maintained that cameras were essential since she believed I was operating an unlawful enterprise. Eventually, she collapsed and confessed she'd placed them because she was weary of individuals discharging her power. The younger officer guided Karen to the police vehicle while the lead officer detailed to me what would occur next. She's been detained for criminal intrusion, breach of privacy, and unlawful monitoring. He mentioned, "You'll have to show up in court, but with the video proof. This is fairly straightforward." As Karen was escorted to the police car, residents came out of their houses, observing in amazed quiet. Her face had become the shade of a mature tomato. Ash grasped that whole community was seeing her disgrace. "This is an error," she shouted out in desperation. "I was merely performing my role. Tell them I was merely performing my role." Nobody moved to support her. Actually, I saw multiple residents recording the event on their devices, clearly gearing up to post the occurrence in the community discussion group from which I'd been oddly omitted. The next morning, I got a message from the HOA deputy leader notifying me that a crisis leadership session had been summoned. By full agreement, Karen had been ousted from her role as leader and briefly barred from leadership awaits the result of her court cases. The message contained an official regret for the unforgivable actions of their ex-leader and obligation to convene with me to talk about rectifying matters. Later that identicality, my doorbell sounded. It was Karen's spouse, appearing drained and ashamed. "I've arrived to express regret," hoitered softly, "and to inform you Karen's been freed on bond. The terms involve remaining at least 100 yards from your land." He gave me an envelope. "This is to pay for any losses or court costs you could face." Karen is unaware I'm handling this. Within was a payment for 5,000. Exactly the sum Karen had warned of penalizing me over the previous few months. As he pivoted to depart, halted. "She must face the magistrate next week. Her attorney indicates she's facing substantial penalties and potential suvirisp." He shook his head mournfully. 20 years in this area, and now, well, a likely need to relocate. Her property is over, as well. Who's going to employ a broker who's been detained for eavesdropping on residents? He departed, shoulders drooped, leaving me positioned in the entry with a payment in my grasp and the clear sense that fairness, though occasionally delayed, can be surprisingly calm for Shena for Pfeiffersy when it ultimately comes.